Welcome back to the Keegan and Company podcast. For those who are new to the show, my name is Keegan Hipgrave. And guys, if you haven't already, could I get you to jump over, give us a little like and subscribe, whatever platform you listen to this podcast on, whether it's YouTube, Apple, Spotify. It's a great way for us to grow the podcast, grow the platform, and just have some incredible guests like I've got on today. In this episode, I'm joined by former professional cyclist and director of sports marketing here at Whoop, Jeremy Powers. How are you, brother?
Hey, very, very good. Great to be on the show. Thank you for having me.
Mate, I'm pumped to be here. We're here at the Whoop HQ in Boston, and mate, what a facility!
I know. Well, we're here. I know. It is. It is. It's a beautiful thing. We've got great views right across from Red Sox, which I heard that you got to go check out.
My very first day, we rolled into Boston in the morning, and then within an hour we're at the Red Sox game.
It's a beautiful.
It was great. Went in, got like the whole kit, got the hat. It was the best, and very fortunate. Thank you for the ticket, everyone here. Got right behind is it the first plate or something like that?
I don't know. You're a step ahead of me. I don't know about what tickets you got, but I also just went to my first game like a month ago with my son. I've been to a baseball game before, but I'd never been to a Red Sox game, which I think people will find to be surprising because I've been from Massachusetts for a pretty long time and I've worked here a pretty long time. And no, I've never been. It was awesome, and my son had a blast. Like we bopped out here. It was late. It was like a 7 o'clock game, but yeah, there's a lot of things that, as you probably saw, go on in the middle of the game that keep things moving, and they have like a timer afterwards, so the game's really like picked up. It used to kind of like the pitcher could sit there for a long time, and the batter could step out of the box. I feel like that stuff's kind of over now, and you'll see like there's a little like timer down there, and
They're onto it.
yeah, they're hip to it.
One of my favorite things was when they sung "Sweet Caroline." I think like after the 6th innings or 7th inning, and I wasn't expecting it. We were sitting next to some Red Sox like locals who loved it, and they were giving us all the insider goss because I don't know about baseball, but it was cool. And we got up, we started singing, like it was the best, man.
Yeah, dude. Definitely cool experience. It definitely something that's like, as American as it gets. Like that's like apple pie, baseball, like Chevrolet. Like these are all kind of Americana things that are.
But even coming into here to the HQ, because obviously coming over from Australia, we came in. We see the photos and the videos, but just walking into the building, it's incredible. Another personal favorite, the snack bar. There's just snacks and there's kombucha and there's everything. You go outside. We had a beautiful lunch beforehand, overlooking Fenway Park. Like,
Yeah.
do you pinch yourself? Like, is it pretty wild to spend your time in a facility like this?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't come probably like you. Like I'm an athlete, so I don't come from a corporate background at all. I don't really know what to expect, but they take care of us here, and we do a lot of great work. And I'd say like we got a great salad here from a local place, and then we also I had an apricot afterwards, which was just kind of hanging out abundantly upstairs. So yeah, they take care of us. We work hard. They work hard for us both. It's a win-win. So
Mate, I'm keen to dive into your professional career and what you've done coming into the corporate world. I think it's a really cool story, and I think it resonates with what we're trying to get across. I think before we start, I kind of want to dig deep into what growing up like was for you. Was cycling always a sport? BMX was there a bunch of different sports that you tried growing up?
yeah, I mean, going back when I was young, I grew up in Connecticut. My parents we owned a family business, ice cream business. Very entrepreneurial dad. Had a lot of things going on, but very busy. I had a lot of energy when I was a young kid, so really, really busy. But definitely like ADD. Very early on, my mom was like, "We got to find a way to get his energy out." But between the kind of the business, growing up in a small family business, smaller town, really looking for a way to be able to get that energy out. And my mom started to funnel me into a ton of sports. I was doing baseball pretty seriously. I was doing like soccer, like playing around. But the bike was something that became pretty clear that like right away that I had a real affinity for it. I really liked it a lot. I liked the freedom and things like that. So yeah, I guess I got that old school work ethic of growing up in a family business combined with a lot of energy, and my parents were looking for a way to get that out. So that's kind of how I fell into sport. I also wasn't like insane at school right away. Like there wasn't like this, oh man, he's gonna, he could write like a doctor paper. He could be doing research, or like, some kids like you see them and you're like, man, you're smart. Like you remember a lot. You're really quick to recall those things. I was never that way. I was always kind of like much more technical, much more interested in like the why on something, and I wanted to listen. But I also was kind of a crazy young kid. Like I had insane amount of energy.
Did you have a natural talent on the bike? Because what I've found and noticed with our mates who've gone on to play professional is usually when they build up their confidence at a young age or they get some wins on the board, they start building that confidence, and that's usually the sport that they go on to progress in. Was that similar for you?
Uh, I mean, my mom probably wouldn't want to hear this story. I did not have success straight away. I actually dropped out of the first 3 races that I was in, and, I have, like, a funny story about my mom where, she's kinda like, "Hey, if you're gonna waste my time and money, we're not gonna do this anymore." She was pretty harsh. My mom grew up in the projects. She didn't grow up with a lot, and, she drove a hard ship consistently with me, and I needed that. So I'm not, like, mad at her
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that. My mom and I have an awesome relationship, but, I took that to heart. Like, I really wanted to ride. I think we got away from it after those first 3 races. I did drop out of every single one of them.
Why'd you
Um,
drop out?
I think it was I just I had first of all, I had the wrong equipment. Like, I had too small of a bike. I didn't know the courses were very technical, and I was really young. I was, like, 12, I just didn't have any idea of what I was getting myself into. And, my mom my mom would be like, "And you don't think that the other kids didn't have the right equipment?" I mean, she was, really
Yeah.
down the but, I took all that in. I thought a lot about that. And that Christmas, that had happened in that summer, and then in that Christmas, I was like, "Hey, I really want a better mountain bike." Like, even though the mountain bike thing was dead, like, we didn't go to any more races that year. There was nothing, like, we weren't talking about bikes because it was a sore subject in the house. And, I was, she did though, that for that Christmas, she got me a Specialized stump jumper. It had like a very modest build on it, so, like, middle of the road. It was, like, champagne colored. It wouldn't have been something I wanted, but it was enough. It was the tool that I needed to get the job done. And that next year, I had, like, a decent level of success, and then once that, like you talked about, that momentum started, man, it went bananas after that.
The momentum piece is it's funny, hey, like you start getting a couple wins on the board and you start progressing, you probably start hanging around people in the similar industry. At what point did you think it was going to be a professional career?
I was very I mean, we worked really hard in the family biz. It was early mornings, late nights, like stocking the trucks, getting the drivers in, doing these things. And then I would always be finding like a place between school or summertime to be able to get the training in. Um, I I think for me the momentum or the excitement around racing started when shortly after those first 2 years of kind of bopping around, there was like a little bit of sponsorship or a little bit of like, "Ooh, you could be good at this thing." Those are the things that really started to push me along, and I felt like were yeah, for me, I was really excited about it automatically. Like, I didn't need any extra pushing. I was like already really into it just immediately right off the bat.
You said that your parents were very entrepreneurial, I imagine super hard workers. Is that something that you take into cycling? Because you've seen it. Like obviously, like my old man, he's a mechanic, right? He's a fitter and turner, used to work on elevators, and growing up, he would just be super hard worker, and you don't register it at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not something that you think about a lot, but then when you come into a professional space, professional environments, professional team, it's like, oh well, if I want to be really good at my craft, I've got to put the work in. Yeah.
Yeah, it was weird. We were balancing all those things. I think when you're young, it's just like it's all green, so everything's new and everything's exciting. When I first got going with it, the idea of like working hard at something was not something that was foreign to me. Like, yeah, my dad was always out late. Everything was always, work as hard as you can and don't ask questions and like kind of get on with it. And I didn't really have that mindset around sport immediately to start, but I definitely knew that like, with all the school sports and with these other things there was like a moment where I realized like, okay, these team sports are great. I really enjoy working as a team for something, but there were politics. And I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to pave my own road on stuff. I didn't want to like be because someone's son was really good at the team, they were going to get the pick to go to the nationals or to be the regional guy or the pitcher to start or something. So I kind of wanted to make my own path. And that's what, the entrepreneurial mindset, like do your own, like pave your own road, like make your own luck, that kind of stuff probably like that 14, 15 years old, I started to really jump into that and went to some more national competitions, which, that sort of started to put me more on the map of like, getting identified as like a junior that had great, potential and got me invited to national team camps. And then those things started kind of, that's like the foundation of building building yourself and building your career up.
Is that a pretty typical path to become a professional cyclist? Because to be honest, mate, I don't know much about cycling. Like
Yeah.
cycling is a very it's a sport that I don't know much about. So in terms of like the progression from a 12, 13, 14 year old coming into the professional scene, is that what it looked like? You start sort of getting picked up around that 15, 16 mark,
Yeah.
or when are you coming into your peak? Because in rugby league and in our sport, guys might making their debut, like their first big game around like the 21, 22, but you're not really playing your best footy
Right.
until maybe 26, 27, 28.
Okay.
So what's the cycling landscape look like?
Yeah, it's different. It's changed a lot.
Yeah.
We've got a lot more tech now, so the guys are going really fast now at younger ages because they got the power meters. They've got so much, sports science and different like hydration and fueling recommendations, and people that are really helping them and kind of taking those things that we were letting go pear shaped and then figuring out. They've figured all those things out now.
Yeah,
So
you
the
guys
kids
did
are
all the
now
hard
they're like
yards.
19, and you're like, okay, like that's the best guy in the world. He's 19.
Yeah.
So things have changed a lot. I don't know. When I was young, there were like a handful of races that we could get to. And then there was some stuff where it was like, hey, we'll fly you here to get you to this race if you do well. Like if you do well, there was a team that I raced for called Team Devo. They were cool. They were baby blue. Everything was taken care of. They had like Oakley as a sponsor, Gary Fisher, Rock Shocks, all these super cool iconic bike brands. And I started with mountain biking. Like road riding to me was not cool at all. I mean, snobby, like we didn't even wave. If we were on the same road, like as a mountain bike, we didn't even wave the road riders.
The savagery.
Yes, exactly. It was
Man.
black and white. We were like, man, we're not talking to these guys. And I was a hardcore mountain biker. I really wanted to be on that team Devo. There was another kid in town who was really, really good rider. He had gotten onto it, and it was the only thing. I mean, I'd wake up, I'd like, the poster was on the wall, like, do you want to be a world champion? Like, I was telling this story the other day, like we had like, the picture of like Britney Spears on the wall, right? Like 14-year-old young man. Like, it's like, okay, so we got like Britney Spears is amazing. Like this sick mountain bike that I want to get, right? This like cool, like, carbon fiber mountain bike. And then like, do you want to be the world champion? Like, just like when you wake up, these are the things that are kind of hanging on the wall. It wasn't other stuff. It was like, these kinds of things were all I was thinking about. But getting on that team, being on Team Devo, getting that kind of like basically like enough results to get their ear, getting on like, getting my resume in their mailbox. And then we came to a race that was here in New England in Mount Snow. And they typically look at like who's 18, 17, 16, 15. What are these? These are all under 18 is the bracket. I think I was 15 and I placed like, let's say I faced like 20th or something like this. But I was the first 15-year-old. And that was sort of the door that got opened to this gentleman named John Kemp, who basically I would say was one of the first guys that like believed in me as a rider. And man, after that, it was kind of like the turbo blasters were on. We had so much great stuff come, like equipment to be able to do the job, where you're like kind of getting by with that, like, kind of like cheaper bike, like stuff breaking all the time. Man, once I was on Team Devo, like I had an abundance of equipment, gear, everything I needed to really make it happen. And that's when you realize at 15, this is like pretty jaw-dropping and crazy experience.
I was going to ask about the people who influenced you on the way, like who were the big ticket guys who really helped you along. It seems
Britney
like
Spears already.
Britney Spears, obviously on the wall. She was the first. Hey, you and me both, brother. Don't worry. But was John one of those guys? As like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth at all, but is he like kind of like a mentor, role model, like that like really helped you along the way?
Kemp ran like the team in a way that I think most of the top riders were on his program. And he was turning riders pro. So he clearly had a formula that allowed guys to be their best, and he created an environment that everyone felt like they could be themselves, but a competitive one too. Do you know what I mean? But I've always found when you hang around with like top like dogs, you learn from them. So all of the best riders, women and young women and young men, all really under 18 or 19 at that time, we're all learning from one another, and we're also all figuring a lot of stuff out. But I mean, crazy fast guys, guys that legitimately were so talented. I mean, some guys, and it was funny because there was a lot of accents on the team. In the United States, we've got like, you do too in Australia, I'm sure, like different accents for different areas of the country.
Yeah.
Like we'd have guys from down in the South, we'd have California kids coming with like bleach dyed hair, baggy clothes, tight clothes, European style guys. Like, we just had all these different makeups, and you'd come home from a trip with the team and you'd have like different colored hair and a really twangy accent. And you're kind of like, what happened to you? But we were all learning from one another and figuring it out. But that mindset of like high performance or like showing up to the race and being your best, even though you're 15 or 16 or whatever, and like having that environment of people that all are really good. And sometimes it just doesn't work out. Like you have a bad race, you flat, you don't do well, but everybody was at such a high level that it was a real tank of talent.
Man, I reckon were those guys a lot older and girls older than you when you first came in? Obviously, like
Yeah, you don't really travel with the team alone when you're that young at that time. So I kind of had I usually would have like a parent with me. Like my mom would usually roll with me to the race or something like that. But not always. Like there were trips where we just go like, hey, we're going to be on the road traveling around in a Freightliner, driving and flying to different events where the trailer is going, and be on the road for 2 months, and I wouldn't see my parents. But yeah, sorry, I missed your actual question. I like lost it there.
oh no, it wasn't a question. I was asking if they were older, if the crew that you were coming to were
Some
older.
of them were older. Yeah. Yeah, not by a lot though. 2 or 3 years.
See, that was and what I was angling at is that I feel like when you come into an environment with people who are a lot older, you just learn. Like you're a sponge. Like I know
Hmm.
when I came into professional rugby league environment, I think it was maybe 17, 18. But the squad is a squad of about 30, and
Hmm.
they range from 20 to 30, 35. So you've got guys who've got families, have bought houses, got their own businesses, like outside as like little investments. They've got their own personal brand, and you're coming in and you're like, oh my god, there's so much to learn here. What do you think was your biggest learning coming into that environment with the guys who might have been a little bit older?
There were a lot of guys that were gonna kick my ass.
Yeah,
To be honest, like it was funny because you come into it and you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna be world champ," like no question about it.
yeah,
But then you kind of quickly realize that you are looking at like the best of the best pretty fast.
yeah,
This also happened in my real life, like my professional racing life, like where you get to that point where you're in the top 5 or you're in the top 10 of the world ranking. You're like, these are the best guys in the world. So there's nowhere really to go from here. You need to get better, and these are the guys you're gonna be racing against week in and week out.
yeah.
I think that was the first thing I noticed, but I was a I had a lot of energy. I've said this. Like I was a total nutter.
But you
So
still do have a lot of energy. What do you
I
mean
would
you
see
did? You
the
still
other
do.
guys, I would see the other riders have a much more they would take things more pragmatically, much more chill, have a really different like mindset getting into it. I'd be really hyper, and I wouldn't say like I had like performance anxiety or anything, but I had anxiety before the race. Like, oh man, like I'm like, in really big anticipation. And I had to learn a lot through like sports psych and different things to be able to, we'd always think about it like an RPM. So like if a tachometer on a car is like if 10,000 or 8,000 is tachometer, I would always be at like 7,000 or like right at the right. But I needed to learn how to get myself to that like 3 to 4,000. So like I was anticipatorily ready for, the stress that I was going to take on and the excitement, but not dumping so much energy getting ready for it. And that was like probably the first thing I realized is like the guys are approaching this stuff differently. And also just like how to pack bags, how to be on a team with other people,
Mm.
and like things that you wouldn't even think about, like, oh, they're gonna ride that tire today, or this is now like knowledge that's going across the whole team. So it's like, oh, they're gonna ride that tire. I was thinking it was this tire, but then you go ride that tire, and you're like, oh wow, that's crazy. Like all the mechanics just switch all the tires out for you. So things like that, I don't know, and you just like learn too. Okay, these guys are eating like pasta before the race or like whatever. These are things that you're at that time. These things are widely out there now, but when you're first getting into something, and my parents both didn't come from endurance sports, you got to kind of learn. You got to learn these things
With the anxiety before the race, you mentioned that you spoke to a sports psychologist
later.
later.
Yeah.
I was going to say what I was originally angling that it was a bit younger, but at what point did that become a thing that you thought was going to be beneficial? Because even coming up, like I know it would have been a lot different when you first started that sports psychology scene. I don't know what it's like in the States, but Australia, it wasn't really prevalent until the last maybe 5, 10 years.
Yeah, we did great work. The gentleman that I saw didn't come from cycling; he came from like golf and some other more traditional American sports. He taught me a lot about like memorization, because I can kind of have a memory like that where like I click onto something and then I click and save it and remember it, and I'm like, okay, that's it. We did a lot with music too. I would always be really focused on music and like replaying songs, doing a lot with those songs to motivate me and to like keep those things like top of mind. And we also learned a lot of positive reinforcement. If I fall down, what happens and how do I react? Like how do I hold myself? Emotional dominance on the start line. Like do I show up and did I already win when I showed up? And this really later when I was like a full pro and like making a real run at my big part of my career, that was something that I really leaned into, is like the emotional dominance. Like you can almost win the race in the start line. And as a junior, it's different because you're like still figuring yourself out and things like this. But for me, really just like breath work and like chilling early was a big thing that we focused on, is like how do I get myself down a little bit? And I would always sit back on, I've done the work, I've got here, I know what I'm doing, and if I have a problem, someone else might have a problem too. You can win this race, you can do this, like you're one of the best in the world. And then I would also go through all of my results that I had leading up to that. So that was kind of the like little bit of the loop that I'd play in my head is, and we were talking about this when we were having lunch earlier, it's just like the world has to revolve around you. And I learned that at a pretty young age, which is like a blessing and a curse now. Like, you know what I mean? Cause you gotta like also have a lot of humility, but yeah, we worked on all those things. The ability to turn that on and turn that off, I learned at a very young age was super important for me, is to have the ego, but to also be able to just be like, hey, I'm also going to be a regular person.
Do you think the breath work and music was a way to bring everything down a notch?
Man, we got it. It was so funny. When I first started out, we'd be like in the diesel pickup truck in the field, like getting ready for the race, pumping jams, like like my mom and I just listening to like techno music. And where we got to with it was a much different place towards the end, like right, because like we're not actually trying to get that place like in the start. We're trying to get a little more chill before we do that. So it's changed. It changed a lot as I went through it. Like we changed a lot of things and figured out a lot of stuff that worked, and we obviously learned a lot of things that didn't work too, which is part of the process.
It's funny how similar I think our stories are crossing over here, man. It's very interesting. Like it's again like such a big piece, that over arousal, like being pumped up and then looking back on your career and thinking, oh, there's so many little things that would have helped, and you probably, you hindsight's a beautiful thing, yeah.
Yeah.
When
Well,
you
that's why you get into the work that, we get to do like now. A little bit, it sounds like we get to do. You get to learn from it, and then you get to hand it down, and then that's what makes the 19-year-olds go so fast now.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. They're standing on the shoulders. Looking back on your professional career, what do you think was the biggest learning that you took out of that?
As like my all of a pro the whole
Yeah,
time, like
yeah.
the
Looking
whole
back,
shooting
yeah,
match.
yeah, yeah. If you could go back and change a few things, or wish you could implement a few things along the journey, what do you think you would put in?
Uh, I don't know. It's so hard to say that because you can't say like I'd change any one thing because it was all a journey. You know what I mean? In some ways, I guess there's a part of me that really wished I had made like Europe a friend. I spent a lot of time in Europe and I lived there a lot, but I really wish that I could have found a way to be more comfortable there,
Yeah.
because I would perform really well here in the U.S. Like undeniably against the best in the world, I would do well here in the United States. I'd go to Europe though, and it'd always be a lot harder for me. So I do wish that like earlier on I had worked on those anxieties, those things that like kind of tripped me up when I was living in Europe, and I never really felt like I was comfortable, whether that was like living situation or team that I had around me. That's probably one of my greatest regrets. Something that I think I really took away from my racing is that like it's a big world, and there's a lot of really talented people in it. Like I look at the whole landscape of like everyone that I got to meet along my journey. I'm just like, man, this is like, there's some really smart and talented people out there and some great athletes, like people that I really admire for how gifted they were and how much they put into their craft. But not every athlete gets the whole package. Everyone's got something they got to work on. And it's the one teeniest percent. It's like the Michael Jordans or, that like really stand out. And they're the ones that had the full package and then also still worked really hard.
Mm. Going around, you've obviously traveled around so many cool places, like in your career. What was the highlight?
Man, I got to
Locations
go.
or races? Was there a career highlight in there?
All of them were different and all of them were awesome. I always loved south of France for training. I know that's like kind of probably cliche, but like all along the Mediterranean coast there, whether you're like a bike rider, you're in Girona, or you kind of go up towards like Nice or Villefranche or Monaco, or like all that area kind of right on into Italy and stuff like that. All on the Mediterranean there is beautiful. It's on the coast is great flat riding, and then you just kind of hang a left or a left off the bike path and you're going up like one of the big cols and you're in France, or then you're in Italy and you're like having pizza. So that's a beautiful area, and there's a lot of like respect for cycling culture and for people on the road. So in that regard, I always love south of France. I got to travel to China and do some racing there, South Korea. I was in Japan a lot, all over North America. Yeah, it took me all over. Really took me all over. And you get to meet a lot of people and do that. I remember we got to like drink yak milk tea in China, and I always think of that as one like wild experience. Like we're with the Tibetan monks, like drinking yak milk tea in like a yurt. It's like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is cool. Like this is just I'm here for a bike race. We're at 11,000 feet, and I'm drinking like yak milk tea or something. I can't even remember, but yeah.
But there's gotta be so many cool experiences along the way, and even like looking back and reflecting on that, it must be really cool. Um, I bet you'd obviously know better than anyone that professional sports are a roller coaster. Yeah, like it's you have the highs, but then you also have the lows. What do you think was the hardest experience that you probably didn't think you would have got past throughout your career? Could be during or it could be post.
Well, I was second a lot as a junior. I never won a national title until I was like well into my 20s, 26, 27, 27, I think, when I won my first title. I was second many times, and I tried to quit many times. In 06, my mom literally had to buy me like a plane ticket to go back to Arizona to train with my friends because I was like totally out. I had had enough. I was like, this is not for me anymore. Like I had turned pro young. I felt like I was sacrificing a lot of time with my friends. My friends were at college. I dropped out of college to like pursue my racing. So there were some times like that that I feel like were hard. But those times around getting second, particularly when you know you were good enough, but you just didn't do it right, like you didn't execute it right, it made winning it at 27, like my first national title, like really important to me, and really meaningful and kind of my like life goal. You know what I mean? Like, okay, like I had been wanting to be national champion as a junior. It was like, oh, he's a shoe in, like he's a favorite. As an under 23, he's a favorite. Every like many years in a row, I was like the favorite to win, but I never did it. So, that kind of like beats you down when you're good enough and you train hard enough, but you just never really do it. You never really get that off your back. But then I went on to win four and almost five. Like I was second again a bunch of times, but looking back, I had my fair share of injuries. I had like bilateral Achilles tendonitis. I got a parasite. I got a bad concussion. I had a bunch of stuff that's like part of sports. Like you can't really plan for it. I mean, this is a story that I told in the Whoop podcast, but I got really sick with something called valley fever about when I was training in Tucson. So that was really, really bad. They
Was
didn't
that
know
in
what it was.
2006? It's like a
Yeah,
fungus.
exactly. It
Yeah.
was actually when my mom bought me that ticket to go back out there and get super fit.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I got super fit. I rode this great stage race. I was like in the top 2 or 3 or something. I was right up there. I almost won. And then I helped someone push their car out of a big hole in Tucson, Arizona. They gotten stuck on the side of the road, like pulling off to like stop for whatever a break. And I had tried to help push them out, and all this dust got into my lungs, and I got this like fungus. And yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to be dramatic, but they're literally like you could die from this. It was really bad.
What did it look like physically?
Collapsed lung, and like all the skin on my body peeled off, and I lost like 20 pounds from an already very emaciated, like super fit, bike rider that had just been training really intensely for 8 weeks. Yeah, I could not even stand up without my heart rate going to like 200. I like would just like sitting on the couch, my heart rate would be like 110, 120. My body was just working so hard to get this infection or this whatever out of my body. But it took months. And I couldn't fly home. I had to stay in Arizona because my lung had collapsed or had partially collapsed. I have like a scar in my lung from it. So, but the doctor, I famously have told this story on a couple of podcasts. So, but the doctor came in and was like, you either have uh, AIDS, cancer, or the worst case of valley fever I've seen in 25 years. And he was like, and so it was really, yeah, I lost it. I was super, yeah, I mean, you can't imagine. Like if the doctor tells you that and you go in, you think you have like well, I went to the chiropractor. I'm backing up a little bit, but I went to the chiropractor because I had a pain in my back. And he was like, "Hey, you have some like yellow in your eyes. You have like a look of like you being sick, and I don't think it's necessarily that you have a back problem. I think you should go and see a doctor." And then they did a scan and they saw that there was some fluid in my lung, but they were like, "Oh, you've just got a little pneumonia. You'll be fine. Like here's some antibiotics. Go back, and if something happens, come back." But man, it wasn't even like a day later that I went back, and then that's when they did like a full CT scan. And they saw that stuff, and that's when it went kind of got a lot more serious. You know, the absolute truth is I always equate that to having a lot of empathy for other people, because I actually feel like I in my own little weird world kind of was I didn't know at that time what I was dealing with. And even if it was this worst case of valley fever that they'd ever seen, it to me, it meant like you might die. Or there's a very good chance that you're going to die here. And so I always look back at that as like giving me a lot of depth as like a person, for myself.
So when you were having this conversation with the doctors, like, where did your head go? Did you actually think that there was a possibility that you might have died?
Oh, I was crying. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think you have to hear it from them and be in that moment when you're like kind of pretty vulnerable and you're not feeling really good. And, you've got this, like, they're going to put a needle in your chest to take all this like fluid out. And there's a kind of, it's a very serious tone when you're in that place. I was also quite young. So 6, I was not even probably 22, 23, something like this. So I was quite young. And yeah, I think I just was like, kind of blown away by it. My uncle lived in Arizona. He lived in Phoenix, which is like a few hours from Tucson. And I immediately called him. He come down, and he got me, and he brought me up, and that's where I kind of sheltered and hung for a while. And then when um, over time, I saw a lot of people that specialized in, I think it's called coccidiomycosis or something of this nature. I don't remember the exact thing, but like basically, I got a serious infection. Even today, if I go, like we've heard a lot about like antibodies and this and that with COVID. If I just not that many years ago, I got this like my like titer level retested, uh, absolutely off the roof.
Yeah,
Like so because the infection, my body put such a strong immune response to it. So they did absolutely nothing.
that's what I was going to ask. How do you combat this
You don't.
fungus? You
So
don't.
so the thing is that like if your body doesn't start to do it on its own, as I recall, I'm not a doctor, I don't take this as like any medical advice, but like the way that I had understood it is like if your body can fight this off, we want it to do all the work naturally in order to build the antibodies so that you don't have anything come back. I think it's for people that have some more compromised immune systems where they're feeling like their body's not reacting quick enough or the virus is kind of getting ahead of them. Those are people where they start to like intervene with some antifungals and things like that. But they're not great to use because then people's bodies don't build a strong enough immunity, is how I recall.
How do you transition back into a professional environment after being so down physically and probably mentally as
Dude, I
well?
had to go back home. I had to go back home when I could finally fly. It was like months later I could finally fly. Got back home and jumped into the family business. Started helping my dad. I rebuilt a jet ski, and cycling went on kind of on the back burner. But dude, that next year was insane. That was really like my moment. '07, I signed to a new team, Cannondale cyclocrossworld.com. A gentleman named Stu Thorne. Um, had been like, hey, I got you penciled in, Jeremy. And I won a ton of races. I think I won like 13 races that next year. Um, so it was like I don't know. I don't really want to go too deep here, but like the stuff, like, whatever the North Star, whatever like your thing is that you look up to. For me, I was just like, this was a sign to like go all in on myself. And when you feel like it's taken away from you, I think that's a high that I can't really describe because you feel like you might not make it. Like the outlook for me, the way I understood it, and the way that I took the doctor's advice with how the severity of like that situation, kind of propelled me to a lot of things after that.
It seems like a wild couple years, from like 2000, 2005, 2006 to probably falling out of love with cycling.
Yeah,
Wanted to give it away. Mum bought your ticket to come back. You go over there, you get the infection, you get told that you might not even be able to leave and then go back to the family business. It seems like a pretty tough couple years, but then to be able to jump in to the next year and win 13 races, like far out, you got to take so much confidence out of that, yeah?
yeah. We ripped it after that. I had I had always had this I'd always had this like take it or leave it mindset. Like, it might work out, it might not. Um, like your career is kind of like that. Like I saw a lot of guys that made it and a lot of riders that didn't. You probably also saw a lot of people that were really, really talented but didn't make it for one reason or another. And I didn't, and it's weird because you can have a lot of success as a junior. You can have a lot of success as a under 23 rider or as a U20, like whatever, but not make it in the real deal. So I don't think anything was ever guaranteed, and I never looked at it like that. And it's weird. You don't really fully like enjoy the financial freedom and like a great team around you. You have to be really, really good in bike riding to get that level of like, ooh, I'm like, I can take care of myself and I can do this. And so it was around that time, like that '07 time frame, that things got like, there's real resources. As a junior, there was enough. Like as an under 23, there was enough. But like really, like, okay, I can build a team here. We can like make videos and I don't know, like MySpace videos or whatever at the time it was, right?
Well,
Like,
sketches, that's a
you know,
flashback,
like
mate.
start to like build a career and like a brand.
Mate, it sounds like such an incredible story, mate. Like I really appreciate you saying that. What we were talking about before when we're having a lunch is that transitional piece out of professional sport. How was that transition for you? Because obviously, you've got an incredible job here, like director of sports marketing. It's an incredible company. But was there a level of uncertainty when you finished up riding professionally? Was there, and it might be financially,
Yeah.
through your site, was there ever a level of discomfort throughout that transition?
Yeah, when I was getting towards the end, it's tough when you retire because you're like you finally have all the wisdom and all like you like kind of know how to like move and shake in the world, and you also have like you've built your name up and people know you and associate you to something, and it's also your like identity. You know what I mean? Someone once said like you die twice as an athlete, and I always think that that's true. Like you die once when you, well, we're talking a lot about death here, and I don't mean to be so dark,
Yeah,
but like
just the way it's flowing, man.
this is just a analogy, if you will.
Yeah.
But like, you kind of die a little bit when you stop your sport because you built your whole life on that. You gave everything. In order to make it as a pro athlete, you have to give absolutely everything. They're like literally friends' weddings, like college, whatever. Like they all for me, all those things had to go away so that I could be the best at what I was focused on, and that was like winning bike races and kind of being like Cold Stone Killer. Like I got to show up on that start line. I got to like win this race. And getting out of it, I think I took as seriously as I took the racing part because the injuries continue to pile up as you get older. I was like 34. I'd had like a little bit of like some hard stuff, like some palpitations and some races that like didn't go the way that I wanted. Um, I gotten like another infection that knocked me out for like half my season my last year. And I worked with two therapists at the same time. I was working one gentleman that taught me a lot about like meditation, and then another woman that taught me just like about life. Both much older than I am, but like simultaneously working through what that transitional period would be like. And I did a ton of breath work. I did a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy. I started to do everything that I would need to do to be successful after racing. And I didn't know what that would be. But those two things I took very, very seriously because I think I probably was not in a place where I had a lot of mentors that had gone through something like that. And I was feeling pretty vulnerable.
What does breath work and meditation do for a transition?
Uh, I still think I battle with the anxiety a lot. I credit a lot of the CBT and a lot of just like talk therapy to being able to get rid of that like what is going to be next or what's going to happen or like I'm afraid of whatever's coming or something like that. And I think that breath work for me is just there was always this like you could medicate yourself with anxiety or you could do a lot of breath work, and I was like, cool, I'll take the latter. Like I'd be more into breath work. Um, so I just made that the thing that I nerded out on and took super seriously. I remember I was like tracking the minutes. I was doing like, I don't know, 100,000 minutes or something like this of like meditating or something like that, like an enormous amount of meditating over like almost like monk style, just like, okay, we're going to do 20 minutes, every single morning. And then like 10 minutes throughout the day, 30 minutes of meditating a day it felt like a lot for a guy like me that's, never really doing anything like that. So that type of just, I think where I found getting out of it, what I found was the hardest was like the endorphins that I missed from not racing and getting that like that high and that serotonin blast from like doing intervals and this routine of things. I needed to figure out a better way to deal with that. Like if I was mad or if I had anxiety or if I had stress or something like that, I would just be like, okay, I'm gonna go and like ride, and that will be my 5 hours of meditating. Like I'm good at that, like not thinking about anything and just riding. But I needed to find a way to like go into the gym and get that serotonin and get that like those endorphins. So like I'd go into the gym and I'd like do a hard workout for 60 minutes versus being on my bike for 5 to get to the same place, and then I'd meditate or I would do these other things. Those were the things that were the stepping stones to let me get from like, hey, I'm a athlete that's training 30 hours a week, 20 on the bike and then another 10 doing other things, to being like, hey, I'm doing 8 to 12 hours a week and I'm bringing it down a little bit and not losing my mind in the process. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
That seems like From a physical point of view, that sounds great. But what about from like a purpose point of view of what you wanted to do in everyday life? Like, because I imagine you still want to work. You still
Yeah.
want to get into whatever that next career is going to be. How did you know how to navigate, or what steps did you take to get to where you are now?
Yeah. Talking, which I'm good at.
Talking a lot, mate.
Um,
You wouldn't have been sure with that,
Yeah,
surely.
no, it was so when I was racing, I had also had a lot of media. I did a lot of media. I produced a lot of media. We had a little media company called Behind the Barriers. It was a day in the life show. And then we had Behind the Barriers TV, which was like more of a network for everyone. We were telling all the athlete stories that we could tell. It was a little bit before its time. We did like live coverage. We did athlete storytelling. We did a lot of day in the life type stuff. We did like little docus on different people. So I had a background in that, and I had always thought I would want to do a podcast. I would want to do, maybe I'd be a YouTuber. Maybe I'd do this because I was kind of already flirting with that pretty seriously when I was racing already. Uh, a company called Global Cycling Network (GCN), when I was winding things down, had invited me over to Bath in England, where they were located. They were bought by Discovery Channel and now Warner Brothers, so it's now Warner Brothers Discovery. But GCN was they offered me a job, basically, is the short story, to be a presenter, to be like a lead commentary podcast host, very very front facing work, which I loved and was a great way for me to like step out of racing. I actually, with that work that I had done on therapy and finding the way to like get those endorphins and to keep riding, but also use the gym, doing all those different things, but then also having something to go straight into for me was massive. I actually couldn't wait to be like kind of done with my riding and like sponsors that I had. Like letting go of those relationships and like putting like a pretty good line in the sand and then moving forward from there, being like, okay, like these contracts end now and I'm going to move forward. I even left, like I was working with Wasserman. I stopped working with Wasserman, and like that's like a management agency
Yeah,
group.
yeah, I've heard.
Stopped working with Wasserman just so that I could focus purely on like GCN and front facing work and like build a career there.
It's interesting when you find something that you really enjoy. You sort of sit up a little bit more. You've got a little bit more energy, and
Dude,
and
I
like,
was in the green. If we're talking about Whoop stuff, I was in the green for like 3 weeks after that. In fact,
yeah,
if I
man,
asked Whoop, like when was my biggest green streak, it was when I retired and started my new job.
that's so
My like
wild.
central nervous system was on point.
What is it about podcasting and conversations that you like so much?
I've always been a storyteller. I've always had a big creative mind, and I've always wanted to scratch that itch. Like I've always really loved being able to tell other people's stories. I like. I think my stuff's cool, but I'm also like way more interested in other people's things. Like honestly, more than my own. I'm always happy to tell my own story for people that are interested, but I'm generally a fan of people and other things, and I always love talented people. So like I'm always really interested in what makes them tick. And I think that that comes back from like those Devo days where I was surrounded by a lot of really great athletes at a really young age, guys that went on to become world champion and had so much talent. And I was always like, this is interesting to me, like how they move and shake in the world or what makes them different. And I also learned from a lot of people by doing that and by listening. I always felt like I was a student.
It's always, but it's an art as well, being able to have a conversation. Obviously, like you were media trained, you would have done a lot of media over your time. You had the media company, but being able to have a conversation like this, like it takes time,
Yeah.
and it is just almost like an art form. It's just like I'll ask you a question, you give me a response, but then there's like three, four, five different ways you can go about the conversation. So it's an art, mate. It is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's also like I feel like I sat at a lot of sides of the table, and to bring you up to speed to like Whoop now is like, I was an athlete, so I have that side of the table covered where I was like, doing deals and getting sponsorships and being that side. And then I was also on the media side where I was like working for a lot of the brands and with a lot of the athletes and like trying to see their goals through because they have like advertising or they want you to do a documentary or they want you to like talk about their new product or do a bike check or whatever the thing was that I was doing or commentate a race or be on this like literally on the side of the course like yelling and like doing live commentary. Like all those things were part of my work when I was doing it, which was fun. And now I'm here where I get to look out for Whoop and I'm looking out for how we show up and how we work with our athletes and how we take care of them and give them like a great tool like this to be at their best. So it's like I've been at all sides of the table, if you know what I mean, with regards to, athlete, like industry, and now brand.
How did you get into it? Well, what's the story there?
Yeah, sponsored. I was sponsored when I was racing that last year. Our now CMO, I think a woman named Allison, AJ, and Sully, our chief, they all reached out and we did some work together. We did some sponsorship work, like a small video. We did some like photo shoots and some video work. And I met Sully on like a really cold bike ride in the snow up in like the most like crazy part of Massachusetts where there's no people. And I was telling him that I had like this hard stuff going on, and we were just talking to keep our mouths from freezing and getting frostbite. But then he was like, "Oh, dude, I'm working at this company, and you got to check this thing. I got to get you one of these." And that's how it started. So when I said talking, that's what I meant. Like, how did you get the job with GC? It's like talking. I was like telling people that I was going to retire, and like that got out, and they called, and that was great. And then like with getting a role here, getting introduced to Whoop, it also came from talking.
So how has your role progressed over the years?
I came in as a category manager for endurance sports, and I think after the first day, at that time, Antonio was our chief marketing officer. He's like, "Okay, the role's global as of now."
Yeah.
So like pretty
That's a good
quickly,
first day,
pretty
mate.
quickly, it was like, all right, we were just looking over like the category of like endurance sports and cycling really, and then it went straight from there to um, it went from there right to global, and then after global, it was like then we started to do Olympic sports, and then after Olympic sports, it started to grow even more. So I have a pretty wide purview of sports today that I'm helping look over.
So what's your main focus at the moment? Like how would you look to target an athlete to bring an athlete on board as an ambassador here at Whoop? Is it obviously they like the product? What does it look like?
Uh, there's so many things that go into it. And it's not like I would say the easiest way to think about it is like, are they authentic in their, do they like the product and will they use the product? Are they in an area where we really want to tell a story and to like, be a brand that people are aspiring, or an aspirational brand that's like exciting. But there's like even when I was an athlete, I would always look at the conversation, and I think this was different. I never came into a conversation. Maybe I just wasn't a big enough athlete or whatever, like not putting myself down at all, but just like I always was asking the brands, what could I do for them? And I do the same thing at Whoop. I'm always asking the athletes, like, how can we help you be your best? And that's really what Whoop is. Like for everyone, it's how can you show up, be your best, whether you're a podcaster, a YouTuber, a professional athlete. It's like we're a tool that can teach you about yourself if you're in that mind space and you can take the time to learn about yourself, and it can help you show up to be your best. And so that's the way that I've approached this job. I've always looked at it as like, hey, I'm here to like host and be a great like relationship manager and like do the things that make your world turn. Like, of course, contracts and negotiations and these things are part of that job. But at the end of the day, like I'm also very interested in giving people, the best like service and making sure that they can be their best by using the product and then telling real, authentic stories. Like the one thing that I think I never have been into is a fake story or like an inauthentic snake oil kind of thing. And Whoop is so far from that. It's a product that can really do a lot for the right person.
That's so interesting. I'm sure you would have met like so many incredible people along the way. Yeah. What would be Who do you think is the most interesting person that you've met, or the most interesting story that you've come across?
Alex Honnold's a great guy. Like a really, really great guy. He's just very, very authentic, super down to earth, and is just one of those really gifted athletes that come along every once in a while, but has wild physiology where he does not experience stress the same way that like anyone else does. His ability. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Alex's story,
I
but
watched the documentary.
okay,
Was
so
it
there
free
you go.
solo?
Yeah, free zone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
mate, incredible, mate,
Yeah.
incredible.
So we've worked with Alex for a while. At my job here. I mean, I've been lucky and I've met like some really great and like really, people that I'm like, oh man, like this is just like insane. Like I can't believe I'm here like with this person. But Alex left an impression on me with his humbleness, with his being a genuine person that's just like really down to earth, easygoing, but also is just like extremely, extremely gifted.
That stuff rubs off on people. Hey,
Yeah.
like the humbleness, the being a good person, like and even coming meeting you, like you're a very warm person. You're very warm. You've got a really great energy about you. Like even seeing you this morning, like first time meeting you properly. We've had a lot of Zoom calls and conversations offline, but you see each other in person and you hug it out straight
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
And
Just pick it right up.
but do you think that's contagious though?
Uh, yeah, I don't know. It's weird because like yes, I would always go out on a limb and be like, man, I would consider myself like I would say that I've never torched a bridge. Like very few bridges in my past are torched. Because I'm always kind of I take people for who they are, and I try to and I hope people will do the same. Like, okay, I'm not gonna be the best person at doing some of these tasks that are in my current job purview today, but I hope that the other 90 things that I'm doing are good enough or meaningful enough that everyone sees the value and is like, hey, I'm going to take that person for who they are. And I've always tried to do that for my whole like life. That's like a thing that I've always been like, hey, like that person's a doctor. They're good at that thing. Like let's let them be a doctor. Like that person's a great cyclist. That person's a great, researcher or whatever. Like I try to take people for who they are and not try to, meld them into someone that they're not. And I try to bring the positive energy. I will look for the good in almost any situation. Like, all right, this can be good. And I do think that that enthusiasm for like getting up for the day isn't always as easy for like even some of my great friends. Like it's just not as easy. But I'm always like, hey, let's like let's start the day in a good way.
Yeah.
Let's put our best foot forward. And that's not to say that I don't have bad days either. Like we all do.
But where does that come from to be like naturally glass half full? Like, do you reckon that comes from having all the shit and all the hard stuff that
I
you've
do.
gone through in professional
Yeah.
sport?
I
Or
also think my dad's like that.
yeah,
And my mom can be like that too. My mom's more of like a drive a hard ship, like, get on with it.
yeah.
But my dad's also like that. I do think your parents like just play a huge role in that stuff. Not to like keep going back to them, but both of them definitely like shaped a lot and put a lot into how I hold myself.
It's interesting because even just like hanging out with my mates back at home, there's the guys that I really want to hang out with. They're very similar to you. Like they're very out there and positive and very glass half full because it's easy, mate. Like it's easy to fall back into that negative feedback loop of if something bad happens to you, like got the fungus in the
Yes.
lung, right? Or
Yeah.
you know,
Not a great day, right?
not a
Like
great day, and it's fine to be upset like that. Even like being what medically retired from foot, whatever your thing is, like it's easy to kick stones, but it's not going to help you go forward. I don't think so. What you said before, you said something where it's like you'll try and look for the good in things. I think that's super important.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. You try to find the best in everyone and you try to bring out the best in everybody. I think it's at times it's like it can really be pushed, like it can be really pressed and pushed into a corner and like kind of bogged down by like whatever the thing is, like heavy travel.
Yeah.
People like, man, I'm just tired. You know what I mean? And that's what vacation's for. That's what taking time away is for. We're all like people at the end of the day. We got to give people credit for where they're at. But yeah, I'm always looking for people that also like bring the best out in me.
Yeah.
So like I'm trying to, especially when I had the team and when I was racing, I had such an awesome team. At the end of my run, I owned the team. Like the team was under like an LLC that was ours. But all the mechanics, all the staff, all the riders, like we tried to have great camaraderie amongst the crew. And that is something that I give a lot of credit to some of the people that I work with today. They have their managers, they have their team that builds them, right? Their videographer, right? Like people that are around them that are bringing the best out in them and allowing them to like show the world what they can do. I think that's a talent in itself. Is like knowing what you need to be your best.
How do you pick your team members? From because I look at it, you've had your team in the cycling world. Now you've obviously built a team here at Whoop as well. How do you pick those people? Are they similar values? Is it filling a void? How do you pick your team members?
Yeah, it honestly is a gut thing, isn't it? I don't know. You just got to kind of know. It's the same in like this role that I'm in here today at Whoop. Is like you got to kind of know by like studying someone and like paying attention to the nuances about how they hold themselves if they're going to be a fit. Um, I don't know if there's you got like with my mechanic, you have to have a really great relationship with your mechanic when you're a bike rider. Like you have to trust that they're gonna like show up and have everything right. And I think I never felt like he held himself as like a strong grown man, but I never felt like he ever wanted to be the person that everyone was like. He didn't need the attention. And honestly, truthfully, like as much as this would probably be a shock to most people, like I also don't need the attention. Like I really could take it or leave it, especially today. Um, and I think that type of mindset where it's like business as usual as much as it can be is something that I was always looking for in people. I never wanted it to be like I always said you can't teach like enthusiasm. Like you can't teach someone to want to be like excited about something. Like they either have it or they don't. They either have to love their work or they don't. Like you can't buy it. You can't be like, hey, I'm going to pay you more and you're going to like this project more. It's just not there. It's not there. So I think that's where I start with like, hey, they have a real affinity. They love this thing that they're doing. And then from that point, it's like, okay, and do we mesh? Do we have good chemistry? And you can kind of tell that like, I mean, Sam, like just you and I just jamming for this time that we've been like, yeah, we probably hang out for a lot. Like if you live where I live, we probably hang out.
Well, mate, I actually just got a road bike, so
You're coming?
so
All right, Massachusetts. You're coming to
no,
Massachusetts. Done.
I might need a bit of help. I actually have no idea what I'm doing.
I can help with that. That's
That's
no
what I
problem.
need. Well, you're the right person, mate. You're the right person. Mate, before we wrap things up, like I said, I've said it before. You're in an incredible position here at Whoop. It's an incredible place to work. I have a lot of conversations with people in different departments, and it's a really good vibe around here. It's a very healthy culture. What do you think's your favorite thing about working for Whoop?
Uh, Man, we have a super fast-paced business, and I really appreciate everybody and what they bring to the table. Like I was saying before, it's not that like I have one thing that stands out. I have a moment that helps the team, but actually there are many people in the marketing team, and every single one of them has like a stamp that they could be like, hey, this pushed this thing forward. And actually, it's like the most team-oriented thing that I've ever done, which I was telling you over lunch is like is hard for me because I was very focused on like number one all the time. So it's something that I have to be like, hey, I don't own the whole process. I need to have others involved here, but I'm humbled every day by like how much people give of their lives to make something like this move and go. So that's probably the best part is getting to work with a lot of great creative minds and work on a lot of really cool projects. You know what I mean? Like we work with some really great talent, and we front face for the business, and they are our biggest voices that we have amongst the many great voices that we have here in the building of sports science and all of these different data things that we do. But these external partners is like helping them being a part of their little worlds, and getting to kind of you know be a part of the one of the very small cogs in their wheelhouse.
Jeremy, before we wrap things up, I've loved everything about this conversation, man. I think this has been really cool. But what do you think is the biggest thing that we didn't touch on today that you'd like to discuss? Or did we cover it all?
Man, we
We got through some topics, man.
we talked about a lot of stuff. Man, I don't think there's one thing that sticks out to me. Like I said, yeah, I try to. I think we were talking about like transitioning from sport, and I think that part of the work that I've done is that's the itch that I was telling you over lunch is just like one of those things that I find, and I'm very interested about the work that you do, but I find to be so interesting, and I'm like so passionate about today is like management of people, how they move after their careers, how they get on during their careers, that team building, that stuff. Because I see a lot of that today as I work with a lot of the athletes, a lot of their managers, a lot of their teams. And I see like great and I see like not as great. And I'm always really interested in that. And then that it's those transitions after too that I'm also very interested in. So, that's kind of the stuff that I'm really focused on now is seeing how people are continuing their careers, how they get on after their careers. And, I'm always open for a conversation for anyone that's listening to your show that wants to like, hey, this was a athlete or this was someone that made a big transition because, whether you're changing your career or like stopping as an athlete and changing, these are things that a lot of us go through and they can be pretty hard. You know what I mean? Like, especially as like, even if you're a semi-pro athlete, but you're like just almost on the cusp, but you don't quite make it. It's like, there's a lot of that. And I get exposed to a lot of that in this work today.
Be careful what you wish for, mate, because there'll be a lot of Australians trying to get your number after this.
Yeah. I mean, I'm open for it. I'm always happy to give time.
Well, mate, that's a huge part of it is this conversation, this podcast, Keegan and Company, we have conversations with a wide range of different athletes, and that transitioning piece is similar. It's a passion of mine, and to see guys do it well and girls do it well, it's really great to see. But then those other guys and girls who really struggle, like it's tough, and you want to help them as much as you can. But I mean, you can only help so much. Like you can take the horse to water, but you can't force the horse to drink. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like you got to go outside your comfort zone. You got to put yourself into something, and like doing nothing will get nothing. That's what I always say. Like, okay, cool. What's the alternative right now? Okay, like we can like sit on the couch and play video games, right? Or we can like put ourselves into a thing that we think we're above. Or that's like what most of the people that they come off of pro sports, and it's been such a beautiful life that they've lived with so many great experiences, but then they think they're above like doing, like email work or data analysis or whatever the thing is that they could like get into is like, hey, but we got to start somewhere, and we got to get to going. And once you get going, then that momentum loop. I'm a big guy on momentum. Like once good things start happening, it's like one builds on top of the other and another builds on top of the other. So, if I was giving one big piece of like, hey, what would I say? Like, hey, just get out there and say yes to a lot of stuff. Don't say no to anything. Like very few times. I had to learn how to say no to a lot of things
Yeah.
because I said yes too much, and then that spins you out for a different reason. But when you're leaving your like professional career or making a big switch, it's like saying yes, I think is like one of the things that I personally feel like helped me get through that period. Whereas like I could have said like, oh man, GCN's not like a great fit. Like I don't know if I could have definitely in my mind made up 100 excuses, but I just was like on the spot. We got in the room, salary, and like I could live. Yes, just like we were done that day. We just yeah, right there on the first time on the spot, like boom, yes, done. Um,
Jeremy, mate, thank you so much for this conversation,
yeah,
man. Mate, honestly, I'm very grateful to have you on the
thank you
podcast.
for having me.
I'm pumped that we got to have a little lunch. It's been awesome to get to know you and the team, and mate, I look forward to spending the next couple of days together, brother. It's been awesome.
Thanks, Keegan. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks everyone for listening.